The kiss that changed the galaxy. The stars shined like diamonds outside the window of the spaceship Orion Hawk. Inside, Captain Ray Carter stood straight in his clean white uniform. He looked calm, but his heart was beating fast. Today, he was not a soldier. He was a guest, a visitor to a strange alien planet called Zendara Prime. Zendara Prime was beautiful and green, with glowing plants and tall crystal towers. The people of this planet, called Zandari, were tall and elegant. Their skin shimmered like silver, and their long hair floated like it was under water. But the most special thing about Zendari people, they had 7 royal sisters, all born from the same soul cluster, and connected in mysterious ways. Ray had one job: represent Earth and show peace. Simple, or so he thought. As the spaceship landed, Zendari guards welcomed him. A royal guide took him to the Great Hall of Union, where the royal family waited. Ray walked slowly, trying to follow every custom he had read about in the diplomatic file. No sudden moves, no loud words, and absolutely no touching. Inside the hall, 7 princesses stood in line, each one more beautiful and strange than the last. Ray's eyes accidentally stopped on the youngest sister, standing at the end. She looked about 20 in human age. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and she held a small glowing fruit in her hands. "This is Lixa, the youngest," the royal speaker said. "She offers you the fruit of trust. Please accept it." Ray smiled. He stepped forward and took the fruit gently. Lixa smiled back, her silver eyes shining. To show his respect, Ray bowed slightly. Then, without thinking, he did something that felt small, something very human. He leaned forward and gave her a quick kiss on the forehead. Silence. Total silence suddenly. Loud horns blasted through the hall. Guards stepped forward. The Queen Mother stood up from her tall throne, her eyes wide. Ray blinked. What did I do?" A voice echoed across the chamber. "By the ancient law of the 7, the kiss of trust upon the youngest binds you to the soul marriage pact." Ray turned pale. "Wait, what?" "I just kissed her forehead. It was just a thank you." But it was too late. A glowing symbol appeared above Ray's head, a golden ring spinning with light. Gasps came from the crowd. The Queen Mother stepped forward. Her voice was clear and powerful. "You have honored the youngest with the kiss of trust. By law, you now must marry not one, but all 7 sisters. The soul link has begun." Ray's mouth opened, but no words came out. The sisters looked at each other. Some were surprised, some confused, and one, the tallest, looked angry. Lixa blushed and looked down. She had not expected this. Ray tried to speak. "This is a misunderstanding. I didn't know." "I thought." The Queen Mother raised her hand. "Intent does not matter. The law is ancient. Your action has spoken. The pact must be completed, or your soul will be cursed, and the link broken forever." Ray stepped back. "You mean, I have to marry all of them? What kind of planet is this?" The royal advisor came forward. "Zandari law is built on soul balance. The sisters are one. If one is chosen, all must join, or none." The oldest sister, Vailna, stepped forward. Her voice was cold. "You touched our soul bond, human. Now you must prove, if you're worthy. You will face 7 trials, 1 from each of us. If you pass," said the second sister, "we accept you. If you fail." "If I fail?" Ray asked. "You will never leave this planet," the Queen Mother said softly. "And your soul will belong to the void." Ray looked around. Everyone was watching. No escape, no undo button. Just a mistake, one small kiss. And now he was caught in something huge. He looked at the 7 sisters. Different eyes, different faces, but somehow, one energy. His voice shook, but he managed a smile. "All right, I'll play your game. Let's see what your trials are." From the shadows, a tall Zandari noble smiled secretly. "This is only the beginning," he whispered to himself. A cold wind moved through the glowing trees of Zandara Prime as captain. Ray Carter stood at the center of the royal reflection garden, where the ground shimmered like glass and the air carried the soft hum of soul energy that lived in every leaf and stone on this alien world, and yet none of it felt real too. Ray, who had just been told he must marry 7 alien princesses because of a forehead kiss he barely remembered giving, walked slowly behind 2 royal guards whose armor pulsed with blue light and whose eyes never blinked as they guided him deeper into the royal palace complex, where the 7 sisters waited in silence, each standing at equal distance from one another, their postures perfect, their expressions unreadable, their presence both beautiful and terrifying. The Queen Mother sat high above them on a floating crystal platform. Her hands folded in her lap, as she watched with eyes that had seen centuries and wars and peace treaties, and now watched a confused human try to breathe under the pressure of ancient laws. He never asked to face the royal advisor named Olis. Stepped forward, his voice echoing across the marble garden, as he spoke of the lore of the Seven, which was written in the celestial scrolls over 4,000 cycles ago, when the first soul cluster of sisters was born to the Zandari royal bloodline, and it was said that their spirits were split from one whole into 7 pieces, and could only be fully joined if a partner came who could accept and bond with each part equally, without fear, without bias, and without failure. Tried to interrupt, tried to ask a question, tried to beg for understanding, but Alice raised a silver hand and continued explaining that the kiss he gave to Princess Lixa was not just a human gesture, but an ancient Zandari symbol of soul interest, and that once the soul interest was shown to the youngest, it activated the pact and connected the hearts of all 7 sisters to the one who made the gesture, forming the start of the soul thread that now glowed faintly over Ray's chest like a mark that could not be erased. The oldest sister stepped forward. Her name was Vailna, and her presence was sharp and strong like a sword made of wind, her eyes cold but not cruel, her voice even and clear, as she declared that Ray would not be accepted so easily, that he must prove himself through the 7 trials, each designed by a different sister, each reflecting the nature of her spirit and challenge, and that if he failed any trial, the bond would shatter, and his mind would break under the weight of 7 rejected souls. The second sister, named Solari, moved without sound, her feet floating inches above the ground, her hands glowing with soft green light, as she whispered that the trials were not tests of strength alone, but of trust, wisdom, feeling control, and the rare human trait of empathy, which could bend even the strongest soul. Energy. If Pure could barely speak, his throat dry, his mind racing through every sci-fi book he had read growing up where humans made first contact with strange alien worlds. But none of those stories had prepared him for this. None had warned him that one kiss could mean marriage and possibly the end of his freedom. The third sister, named Issel, stepped forward, her hair moving like fire and her eyes full of curiosity. She looked at Ray with amusement, as if this whole thing was a fun new experiment, and said that the first trial would begin in one moon's rise, and that Ray would be given time to rest and prepare, though she doubted he would be able to sleep before Ray could respond. The sisters began to move away, each one fading into the palace through different paths, each one carrying a different energy. Some warm, some cold, some like gravity, pulling at the edges of his thoughts, and he suddenly felt the weight of what had happened pressed down on him like the sky had shifted just a little too far. Alone now in the quiet garden, Ray sat on the edge of a floating bench, his hands covering his face, his breath shaky as memories of Earth came flooding back, the silence of space, the smell of coffee in the command room, the old pictures of his dog taped to the control panel, and he wondered how he had gone from exploring stars to being trapped by a law older than any human nation. Thanos. He looked up at the stars above him. A strange voice entered his mind, not loud, not harsh, just soft like wind on water, and he knew somehow it was one of the sisters, speaking to him, not with words, but with feeling, with color, with something deeper than language. And it whispered to him, not a warning, but a challenge. You are not ready, but you must try. And in that moment, Ray stood up, his fists clenched, not in anger, but in decision. If this was his fate, then he would meet it, not as a victim, but as a human. Humans always fight, always adapt, always surprise, always win, even in the strangest corners of the galaxy, even when marrying 7 alien princesses, especially then. The morning on Zandara Prime arrived not with light but with sound, as the twin suns rose behind the crystal mountains and sang a low note across the valley, a sound that made the trees glow and the skies shimmer. And deep inside the royal trial arena, Captain Ray Carter stood alone, wearing ceremonial armor crafted overnight by Zandari energy smiths who never spoke and never slept, and now their work wrapped his body in a silver blue suit that felt too light to be real and too heavy to be human. Above him, in floating spectator rings, thousands of Zandari citizens gathered, their eyes focused, their bodies still, their emotions hidden behind glowing veils, while in the highest circle the 7 royal sisters watched from golden thrones, each holding a different crystal staff that represented their sole role in the ancient balance of power. And at the center of them all stood Vailna, the oldest, the firstborn, the warrior, the judge of strength and courage, whose trial would now begin. Descended slowly from her platform, her feet not touching the ground, her battle armor unlike Ray's, crafted from dark obsidian and layered with moving light patterns that shifted with her thoughts, and in her hand she held a long blade that hummed with energy, not sharpness, not weight, but something else, something that felt like history compressed into a weaponry. tried to steady his breathing as Vailna approached, her eyes locked on his, not cruel, not kind, just focused like a storm looking at a rock and deciding if it would move or stamp. The trial of the first sister begins, the royal speaker announced, his voice echoing through the arena. Captain Ray Carter of Earth must survive the blade path and face the warriors. Measure: if he falls, he fails. If he bleeds, he learns. If he stands, he passes. Vailna raised her blade and pointed it at Ray, then stepped back and drew a circle in the air with its tip. The ground beneath them glowed and changed, revealing a battlefield covered in tall bluegrass that shifted like ocean waves and stone pillars, floating in the air like broken islands frozen mid-collapse, each one pulsing with trial energy. "This is not combat, this is clarity," Vailna said, her voice deep and clear. "Must reach the center of the arena without being touched by the blade. If you do, you pass. If you hesitate, you fall. If you lie to your body or your mind, you will see the truth." Ray nodded because words failed him, and then she moved, not like a person but like light bending around time, her blade slicing through air so fast it screamed, and the ground split where it touched, and Ray ducked, rolled, and ran before thinking, before planning, because some part of him knew thinking would only get him hurt. He leapt over a floating stone that burst into blue dust behind him, as her blade barely missed his back, and he kept moving, kept dodging, kept breathing in short, sharp bursts that almost felt like pain, and still she came, her steps silent, her strikes perfect, her presence a lesson in control and destruction. "You are not just a warrior," she said between strikes, "you are a symbol, and symbols must earn their meaning." Ray stumbled over a root that rose suddenly from the ground, a trick of the trial, a test of his awareness, and he hit the ground hard, his armor sparking as he slid, but he rolled just in time to avoid another slash that carved a trench beside his head, so close he could smell the heat. He got up coughing and kept moving toward the center, where a glowing circle hovered above the earth, like a doorway, like salvation, and he told himself he was almost there. Just a little more of Vailna appeared in front of him, her blade raised and ready, and Ray knew he could not dodge this time, not jump, not block, not win. So he closed his eyes and stood still, arms down, heart open, and the blade stopped at his neck, humming softly. "You do not run," she said. "You do not fight back. You accept, and in that you find strength. Not all battles are won with fire. Some are passed by standing still." In the storm, she stepped back, and the blade vanished into light in the arena. Shifted again, returning to its original form, the floating stones gone, the grass faded, the trial complete. Fell to his knees, not from injury but from relief, and looked up as the crowd began to hum a sound of approval, soft and low, like thunder waiting to be born. The Queen Mother stood and raised her hand, and the trial was declared past, and the soul thread above Ray's chest grew brighter, stronger, more stable. Vailna returned to her place among the sisters, and for the first time she allowed a small nod of respect to pass between them. One trial down, 6 to go, and as Ray stood once more, breathing hard but smiling, he realized something dangerous. He was starting to care. He was starting to believe, and belief was the most powerful weapon of all. The moon of Xandara Prime moved slowly across the sky like a glowing eye, watching every secret, every breath, every thought, as Captain Ray Carter walked through the quiet corridors of the Royal Mind Garden, where walls were made of living crystal, and the floor pulsed gently with memory patterns that responded to emotion and truth and silence. Today was the trial of the second sister, the one they called Solari. The silent mind, the dreamweaver. The one who spoke with feelings instead of words and shaped illusions with a single blink. And now Ray was here, not to fight, not to run, but to survive. Her world of whispers and shadow. No one had told him what this trial would be. No swords, no armor, no instructions, just the garden and the path. And Solari waiting at the far end of a bridge made of soundless light, her silver robes floating around her like mist, and her face as calm as the stars above. Ray stepped onto the bridge, and the moment his foot touched the glowing surface, the world around him changed, and he was no longer on Xandara, but somewhere else, somewhere familiar and wrong and dangerous. He stood on Earth, or something like Earth, a memory reshaped, a lie, wearing the skin of truth. The sky was blue, but to clean the birds sang, but without rhythm, and the people smiled with eyes that were empty, like masks painted by ghosts. Turned and saw the Orion Hawkish ship floating in the air, above a city he once loved and feared, and hated, and missed, but now something felt off, like the gravity of the place was built on doubt. Solari's voice entered his mind, not with words, but with pressure, like a soft hand on his thoughts, and she whispered, "Feel but do not believe, see but do not accept, hear but do not surrender. This is your mind," she said, "and your trap and your trial." Ray took a deep breath and walked into the false city, each step heavy, each breath too easy, and the streets shifted with every doubt he had ever hidden, every fear he had ever buried. He saw his crew standing by the ship smiling too wide, saying, "Come back with us. It's over now." The Xandari changed their minds. It was just a dream. None of it was real. "Come home." Ray stepped back and closed his eyes. He whispered, "No, this is not real. This is not true." And the illusion cracked like thin glass under pressure, but did not shatter. He walked further and found himself in his childhood home. The smell of his mother's cooking in the air, the sound of old music playing, and the warmth of belonging crawling over his skin, like a lie made of love. Solari whispered again, "If you stay here, you fail. If you forget who you are, you lose everything." Ray looked at the photo on the wall, his younger self smiling without fear, and he touched the frame and felt nothing, and that was enough to break the illusion. Again, but still, the world shifted and refused to die. He now stood in a dark room filled with mirrors, each one showing a different version of himself, one in pain, one in anger, one in fear, one in joy, one in greed, one in loss, and all of them spoke at once, shouting truths and lies and memories and regrets, until the noise became silence and the silence became weight. He dropped to his knees, holding his head, the soul thread above his chest, flickering, as if it too had doubts now, as if even the bond could be broken by forgetting. Then, from the mirrors stepped a shadow, not Solari, but something built from her power, a version of her twisted by Ray's fears. She looked at him with eyes full of judgment, and said in a voice made of thunder, "You are weak, you are temporary, you are not worthy. Of the seven you are only human, and you will fail them all." Ray stood slowly, his body shaking, his breath uneven, and he looked at the shadow and said in a voice that cracked and bled, "Maybe I am, maybe I will, but I will try, and I will not stop, and I will not believe this lie, because even in darkness I remember the stars." The mirrors shattered, and the room exploded in light and sound, and when the world settled again, Ray was back in the garden. The bridge gone, the trial ended, and Solari stood before him, her hand on his forehead, her touch soft like water, like peace. She nodded without speaking, and stepped away, and the soul thread on Ray's chest glowed stronger now, brighter, more stable, more alive. The Queen Mother raised her hand from her high seat, and the crowd above gave a silent wave of energy. A Xandari sign of deep respect and recognition. Ray walked away from the garden, his mind tired, his heart full, his steps slow but steady, and he knew now that the trials were not just about marriage or law or culture, but something bigger, something deeper, something ancient and alive. Each sister was a gate, and each trial was a question, and he had to answer them, not with words, but with who he really was. And in the shadows of the palace far above, a noble watched from behind a veil, his eyes narrow, his thoughts sharp, his voice unheard as he whispered, "The human should not have passed. This one and the next will not be so kind." The sky over Xandara Prime rippled with streams of purple light, as if the planet itself were dreaming awake, and deep beneath its glowing forests, Captain Ray Carter stood inside the Chamber of Echoes, where the walls were made of memory, glass, and every step he took awakened voices not spoken but remembered, not heard but felt, as vibrations in the bones. This was the trial of the third sister, named Isel. The wild sparked the soul of curiosity and wonder, and unpredictable energy, and Ray had no idea what to expect, because her world was not of strength or silence, but of chaos and questions, and now he stood inside her mind maze where truth and fiction danced together without rhythm. He looked up and saw a sky made of thoughts where stars blinked like eyes watching from another timeline, and Isel appeared in front of him without warning, her hair glowing like liquid fire, her smile wide like a child and dangerous like a game you think you understand, until it eats you whole. She tilted her head and clapped once, and suddenly the chamber fell away, and Ray was falling through layers of moments, not his own, seeing flashes of planets he had never visited, voices he had never heard, and yet every image felt personal, every sound felt sharp, every breath felt like it might be his last, or first, or both. "This is not a trial," she said without moving her lips. "This is a gift, and a curse, and a door, and a mirror, and you must walk through it with your eyes open, even when they want to." Ray landed on something soft, a cloud made of memory, and saw a version of himself, older, tired, standing alone at the edge of a ruined Xandara. Cities in flames, soul threads broken, sisters gone, and in his hand a small glowing device pulsing with guilt and regret, and his voice whispered softly, "I chose Earth and left them behind." "No," Ray muttered, "not real, not true, not yet." But the vision did not fade, instead it shifted, and now he stood in a grand chamber on Earth, his name called by leaders and heroes praised as the man who saved humanity by refusing a bond with an alien world, and behind him, in shadows, the seven sisters stood silent, watching him disappear from their story. He turned away from it, but the visions kept pulling him into futures that had not happened, into pasts that could never be changed into possibilities. shaped by fear and hope and love and failure and success, all twisted into a knot around his heart. Then he saw a child, her eyes silver, like the Zandari, her skin light like earth, her voice soft like both worlds together, and she asked him one question that broke the sky around him like glasswire. Did you choose to forget? Uzray fell to his knees, surrounded by pieces of maybe, and could be, and almost, and never, and he screamed not in fear, but in fight, because he did not come this far to be broken by dreams, wherein the skin of Faticile appeared again. Her eyes wide with surprise, as if she had not expected him to stand back up, as if she had created the maze to test not just him but herself, and she said, you saw the forbidden line, the one that even we cannot walk without being changed. Reached forward and touched her hand and said, I do not know what the future is, and I do not know what I will become, but I know I will not choose fear, and I will not run from what this is. Whatever this becomes, I will stand in it, and I will carry it, and I will honor Yggdrasil. Smiled again, a little softer, a little sadder, and the maze faded. The sky closed, the chamber of echoes returned, and the soul thread above Ray's chest glowed brighter now, holding a new symbol, one that only the sisters understood, and none had ever seen before. From the high seats the Queen Mother stood, her face unreadable, but her hand raised, and the crowd once more gave the silent wave of deep respect, and something more, this time something like awe, walked out of the chamber slower than before, his breath steady, his eyes sharper, his heart heavier, not with pain, but with purpose, and he knew now that each trial was not a puzzle to be solved, but a piece of a larger truth, one that could not be seen all at once. But the palace towers a storm began to form, not of rain, but of energy, wild and old, a sign that the soul lines were shifting, that something ancient was awakening, and in the deepest vaults of Zandara, the oracle stones cracked for the first time in 1,000 cycles. Far away in a quiet hall, a figure in black robes watched a small mirror, where Ray's reflection flickered and changed, and faded, and returned on the figure. Whispered he saw it. He was not supposed to, but he saw it tanned. Now nothing will remain the same. The night on Zandara Prime was silent, but not peaceful, as shadows crawled across the floating towers, and the crystal-lit halls dimmed one by one, as if the planet itself were holding its breath, and deep in the heart of the palace Captain Ray Carter sat in a chamber with walls that moved like liquid shadow, the air thick with questions that had no voices and answers that feared to be spoken. This was the trial of the fourth sister Narya, the Shadow Keeper, the Watcher, the Unseen One, who smiled rarely and spoke even less, and unlike the others she had never looked Ray in the eyes, never offered a word of welcome or challenge or curiosity, and now her silence felt like a storm, waiting for permission to destroy. Ray stood when the wall behind him vanished, revealing a spiral staircase made of black light, stretching downward into the earth, deeper than logic, deeper than memory, and he walked without hesitation because something inside him knew that to stop now was not safety, but surrender. Each step whispered old doubts, each breath tasted like forgotten guilt, and when he reached the bottom, he found a hall that pulsed with red symbols, burning softly like the veins of a dying star, and there at the center stood Narya, dressed in robes of shadow, her face hidden behind a veil of smoke, her hands folded in front of her as if she waited not for a trial, but a confession. Without speaking, she raised one hand, and the room shifted. The walls became glass, and behind them flashed moments stolen from Ray's past failures, broken promises, the time he ignored, a distress signal to save fuel the argument with his brother before leaving Earth. The mission he left halfway because the data felt wrong, and fear had whispered louder than duty. Ray clenched his fists, but said nothing because shame had already spoken, and Narya lowered her hand, and the images vanished, replaced by a mirror in the center of the room, tall and thin and dark, as a black hole without stars, and in its surface Ray saw not himself, but another version, one who had already failed the trials and chosen comfort over courage, one who had walked away from the sisters, and let the bond fade into myth. The mirror cracked, and from its center stepped a figure shaped like Ray, but darker eyes, colder, smile sharper, and it spoke in his voice twisted by doubt, saying, you cannot protect them, you do not belong here. You are not worthy of their trust, and you will bring them pain, not peace. Ray stepped forward and replied, I am not perfect, I am not always strong, I do not know all the answers, but I choose them, and I will keep choosing them every day until I cannot walk, and then I will crawl, and then I will still choose, because that is what this bond means to me. The shadow Ray attacked with speed and fury, born from fear and memory, but Ray did not fight back with fists. He fought with truth, with every word he had spoken to the sisters, every promise, every lesson, and the shadow weakened. Its strikes slower, its eyes flickering until it shattered into dust and silence. stepped forward slowly, her veil lifting slightly to reveal eyes like deep oceans, still and unreadable, and she raised one hand to Ray's chest, touching the soul thread, which now spun with a deeper color, darker than before, yet brighter in its strength, and she said only one word. Passed. As Ray turned to leave the chamber, he felt a shift in the air, like something had broken far away. And he was right, because at that same moment across the palace in the Hall of Stars, the great light crystal shattered with a scream of energy, and the alarms of Zandara began to rise for the first time in generations. The guards ran, the sisters stood, the Queen Mother froze, and in the middle of the chaos, a figure in golden robes stepped into the light. His face smug, his hands held high, and he shouted, "This trial is false. This union is a threat. The human is not chosen, he is planted, and I have proof." Ray rushed into the hall as the crowd parted, and the sisters surrounded him, their soul threads glowing with confusion and defense, and Narya stood between him and the accuser, her face calm, her voice steady, as she said, "Your lies have no place here." But the figure laughed, and held up a device pulsing with stolen code and forbidden energy, and it cast an image into the air showing Ray's kiss to Lixa, altered, twisted, framed as manipulation, and not mistake, and the crowd gasped as the image repeated over and over. Ray stepped forward, but before he could speak, the Queen Mother raised her hand and said, "The trials will stop, the bond will pause, the truth must be known, and you will be tested once more in front of the Eye of Land." Somewhere deep inside the palace vaults, a hidden lock clicked open as ancient energy stirred and whispered, "If this bond is broken, then so is the peace between stars." The sky over Zandara Prime burned with ribbons of violet and silver as the twin suns aligned above the highest peak and cast their light down upon the Valley of Souls, where no shadow could exist and no lie could live. And within the heart of this sacred place stood Captain Ray Carter, surrounded by silence so deep it felt like the beginning of time itself. He wore no armor, no symbol of rank, only a simple robe of white woven from stardust and truth, and across from him stood the 7 sisters of Zandara, each dressed in the color of her trial, each glowing with the memory of what had been overcome and what still remained unfinished, because one step still remained, and it was not a trial of strength or mind or vision, but a choice that could not be undone. The Queen Mother stood at the edge of the valley, her staff raised high, her voice echoing across the world, as she declared this the final moment of the soul bond that had shaken prophecy and bent the fabric of fate, and now all that was left was the vow, the answer, the yes, that must come freely, without pressure, without fear, without doubt. Trey took a deep breath and looked at the sisters one by one, and he remembered every moment, every word, every test that had brought him here, and he saw not alien beings or royal titles, but 7 lives that had opened their worlds to him, even when he had not asked, and 7 hearts that had risked everything to see. If one human could carry what others had called impossible, the blade and the wall, who had tested his courage, and now stood with her arms crossed, hiding the smallest smile, Solari, the whisper and the mirror, who had shown him his fears and helped him walk through them without breaking soul, the spark and the storm, who had taken him into the heart of the future and asked him to stand anyway, Naria, the watcher and the shadow, who had forced him to face himself and had believed him when others did not. The others stood beside them, Lixa, the youngest, still unsure but brave enough to hope, Saren, the speaker whose song had been quiet until now, and Renee, the healer who had never tested him, but had watched from the edge with knowing eyes. Waiting for this moment, Trey stepped forward, and the soul thread above his chest began to glow brighter than ever, pulsing not just with his energy, but with theirs, and the thread split into 7 streams, each connecting him to one of them, and the color of each stream was different, yet somehow the same, as if there were notes of a single song now ready to be played. He raised his hands and said, "I do not promise to be perfect. I do not promise to understand everything. I do not promise that I will never fall or fail or forget, but I do promise that I will stand with you, walk beside you, grow with you, learn from you, protect you, and never run, even when running would be easier than staying there." Sisters raised their staffs together, and the valley filled with light, not the kind that shines, but the kind that sings, and the Queen Mother closed her eyes and released the seal that had kept their bond from finalizing, and now the soul threads tightened into one great ring of energy that rose above their heads and spun slowly, like a moon being born. All of Zandara watched from the skies, and from the temples, and from the towers, as the human who had once kissed, without knowing, now spoke with full knowledge of what it meant, and what it could cost. Traitor, who had tried to break the trials, now sat silent, his voice taken by the eye of law, which had seen the lie and erased it from the record, and the noble families who had whispered of rebellion now bowed their heads in stillness. Not submission, but acceptances, the bond sealed. Ray felt Something shift inside him, not pain, not pressure, but expansion, like a door in his chest, had opened and let the stars walk in, and he knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again, because now he was not just human, not just visitor, not just diplomat. He was part of something older than war, older than peace, older even than time. The wedding was not a kiss or a crown or a ring, but a song sung in the soul threads, and heard only by those who had walked the path, and the seven sisters sang it together in a language that needed no words, and Ray listened with tears that did not fall, but still washed him clean. When the lights faded, and the valley returned to silence, Ray looked up and saw not 7 strangers, but 7 homes, and behind them a sky that no longer looked so far away from this day. The stars would remember, and the histories would whisper, not of the man who kissed the youngest, but of the one who stayed, and in staying changed everything.